Baby Deluke, 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 baby Deluke.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we are here to talk about the Animo Polar masterpiece, beautiful character design that is XIAO. If you guys are not new to the channel, you know I've been waiting for XIAO for a very long time. I have set it up to where I am guaranteed to pull him. Not only is he a very hot man, but his design looks like it's going to be fully geared towards DPS, which is very cool, very interesting. So I figured I'd make a video in advance, basically going over how to prepare for him, because it's only 2 weeks away. We're going to be going over talents, resources for leveling, weapons, artifacts, general team dynamics, and a whole lot more, so make sure to stick around for that. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it. So of course, the most important thing when it comes to preparing for a character is their talents, leveling, ascension, all that. But XIAO is an interesting case in the sense that you can't farm his ascension materials right away, because he uses a specific material for ascension that isn't going to be available until 1.3. That of course being right below me, the juvenile jade, which may or may not come from, you know, a certain enemy that is yet to be released in the game. Perhaps you are all aware of the Geovishap hatchlings that you see in Liwa, and maybe just maybe based off beta testing as well as some speculation. Not leaks, definitely not leaks, could never be leaks. We don't do leaks on this channel, of course not. That we are going to be seeing a granddaddy Geovishap in 1.3, but you are going to have to fight this thing in order to get the materials needed to ascend XIAO, but everything else is very farmable. Of course, you will need to fight the Animo hypostasis more than a handful of times. I would hope that you don't have to spend resin on the Geovishap boss, because that means doing that and the hypostasis at the same time, which is a lot of resin. You'll also need the I don't want to try to pronounce it. You guys know, the flower. I'm not going to make a fool of myself. The white flowers from Liwa. That's what you need. Slime condensate, obviously going to be very easy to farm. There's slimes everywhere on the map. And for his talents, you will need prosperity. Thankfully, this event going on right now with the hypostasis is giving us a decent source of talent books. And finally, you'll need to do the child domains. So if you're not using Zhongli, your child, so you haven't had a reason to use the golden house domain, now's the time. Of course, it's only once a week, so make sure you start farming it for those materials. And if you already have Zhongli, your child, and use it anyway, then perfect. Now moving on to artifacts, Viridescent is definitely the way to go. Based off his elemental skill and burst, which I will put the descriptions right here, but I won't show where I got them from, because it's just speculation. We don't know what they are. None of that has been disclosed yet. I don't look at leaks. Of course not. Couldn't be me. Never. Mihoyo, please be nice to me. His elemental skill can be used twice before cooldown, even 3 times if you get his first constellation. And his burst not only gives him an overall attack bonus, but converts all of his normal attacks into animo damage. Now his burst isn't exactly spammable, the energy cost is 70, but the cooldown for his skill is only 10 seconds, so you will be dealing constant animo with him. You can also consider doing 2-piece Viridescent, 2-piece Noblesse to give his burst even more damage output. You could go with 4-piece Noblesse, but again, 70 energy cost is relatively high, but you could counter that by giving a support character the 4-piece Exile set. Characters who you only swap in to use their skill and burst and swap them right back out could improve XIAO's overall energy recharge, therefore burst spamming. So Noblesse is definitely an option. Of course, Gladiator if you luck out with your boss runs, with your Abyss runs, and you get decent stats on these, then always a good pick. 2-piece Viridescent, 2-piece Troop could also be good. If you're worried about proccing the effects of the 4-piece Viridescent, then just generally raising your mastery is a good alternative. I'd say one of the least optimal ways to go is by giving him Bloodstained. His charge attacks do scale relatively well, but physical damage overall won't be the best option for him, considering that his skill and his burst both deal animo damage and purely animo damage. And for anyone that just started playing, if you're at a lower adventure rank and can't get yourself some good 5-star artifacts, then Gambler is probably the best of the 4 stars, at least for the 2-piece since his elemental skill does hit pretty hard. I am a firm believer that the Blizzard Strayer set could work on anybody. With animo damage, if you have a Hydro and Cryo user in your team, you freeze enemies, obviously the animo will extend that, so you can use this to guarantee crits with XIAO, but you would be making the most of the 2-piece set. Even with Chongyun, when it's time for XIAO to use his burst, his animo damage will override Chongyun's E, so you won't get any cryo hits when the burst is active. And while we're on his burst, let's talk about the double-edged sword aspect of it. It's not nearly as bad as people made it out to be. You lose 2 or 3% of your HP per second depending on what level the talent's at, but it's not your base HP, it's not your max HP, it's current HP. So if your current HP is at 1000, then you'll lose 20 HP for the first second, but then your HP is at 980 and you're going to be losing 2% of that, not another base 20. So it's really not too bad. I would still say though that you need a healer in your team regardless, because over time if you end up being able to spam the burst, yeah, you're gonna lose a lot of health. And on the topic of that, why not go into team dynamics? Obviously with an Animo, a swirl DPS unit, you are going to want a lot of elemental support. You're definitely going to want characters who have consistent elemental damage out on the field for long periods of time. So Xiangling with Pyronado with Goba could be good for that. Everybody should have at least one free Xiangling. She could be your 4-piece exile user since you want to use Pyronado as much as possible. As much as I hate to say it, because as much as I hate him, Bennett is going to be a very good partner for XIAO. He heals, he gives him attack buffs with his elemental burst, and of course pyro swirls are bussin'. Super low cooldown on his skill means consistent pyro damage. For a healer in the team, I would recommend either him or Barbara. Chi-Chi's elemental damage is very inconsistent, very infrequent, and Noelle with Crystallize. I'm very happy that Barbara is actually going to be useful again when 1.3 drops. Everyone's pretty much done with the Dragon Spine, done with the new domain. The Abyss is going to go back to normal, which means no more freezing yourself trying to heal with Barbara. Jean can also be a very good partner, not just for healing, but for that Animo resonance. Of course, for elemental support, there is always Sucrose, the most broken elemental support in the game, raising your mastery and making even more swirl damage. Xingqiu with Rain Cutter high energy recharge will give you infinite hydro swirls. Fischl, of course, with Oz, constant electro, constant elemental damage. If you want a secondary DPS unit in the team in case swirl isn't doing the job, you would probably want a physical damage user to balance it out. If you have a Diluc, that could also be great. Ningguang is good at acting independently on her own. Noelle and Diana, who both have shields and healing at the same time, could let XIAO run loose. You won't have to worry about him dealing damage to himself nearly as much. Having Diana and then Child as your secondary DPS could be good. They would freeze enemies, and of course the Animo will extend that. There are very few characters that XIAO does not blend with. If you have any sort of healing in your team, you do not have to worry about XIAO's self-damage, which means you don't have to worry about investing HP into your artifacts into substats. You can do all attack percent, recharge, crit rate, crit damage, and if you have 4-piece exile, you don't really have to worry about the recharge. Animo damage goblet, probably going to be better than attack percent. If you do have a heavy reaction-based team, then elemental mastery is always going to be important, but the substat investment, of course, has to do a lot with the weapons, so let's jump into those. One of the most obvious choices is going to be Deathmatch. One of the Battle Pass weapons that I know people specifically started stacking, started refining Deathmatch with XIAO in mind. If you're going for a crit build, of course, it's a good option. You don't have to worry about crit rate for your headpiece, you can just do it in damage, and the effect is ever present, which is always a positive. You don't need to proc it, it's always going to be there, and I think this is the first time where people should start investing in the prototype Grudge, the Star Glitter, as it's horribly been renamed, over Crescent Pike, because you do not care about physical damage with XIAO. With his skill and with his burst, you're going to do mostly Animo damage, so the main effect right here, or the main stat I should say, is going to be pretty much useless. If you want to spam his burst and you have a decent crit build, then Favonius Lance is a good shout. I'd still say this is more of a support weapon, but you can use it on XIAO if that's all you have. The main issue with it is that 12 seconds for the cooldown is relatively high for a main DPS unit, someone that's meant to be out on the field for long periods of time, but if you can refine it, then of course it would be a lot better. Dragon's Bane, interestingly enough, could also be a decent pick. If you have Hydro or Pyro users in your team, you're going to get Swirl, so your enemies are going to be inflicted with these elements for long periods of time. So if you're going for a mastery build, then this is of course the weapon for you. Like I said before, the prototype Star Glitter is actually better than the Pike. At max refinement, that 8% shoots up to 16, you can stack it twice, and since XIAO's elemental skill is usable twice in a row before cooldown, the effect lasts for 12 seconds. XIAO's elemental skill only has a cooldown of 10 seconds. As long as you're spamming it, you will have that 32% buff to your normal and charge attacks all the time, and with that high base energy recharge able to spam XIAO's burst more often, it is the perfect free-to-play weapon for him. Then briefly touching on 5 stars, Primordial, obviously better than Skyward, especially for a straight-up DPS build. Then if you got your hands on Vortex Vanquisher, if you have a non-Geo Shield user in your team like Diona, like Xinyan, and you switch XIAO over to a 4-piece Bulleye, then this is going to be broken like always. Even just looking at his 2 Ascension passives, this character was obviously meant for DPS. I won't go too deep into his constellations, I guess I'll just cover the first 2. C1 lets him use his skill 3 times before recharge instead of 2, I think I said that before. Then C2 gives him more energy recharge when he is not on the field, when he's not active. So if you have a secondary DPS, if XIAO is not on the field for the majority of the time, then this is obviously going to be pretty useful. I'll go ahead and throw up the scaling when it comes to his talent levels right now, so you get a good idea of which ones you want to invest into, or rather what you want to prioritize, because who likes farming talent books? I was really expecting his plunge damage to do a lot more, since that was his main gimmick, the thing that made him unique in the beta, and it looks like it it doesn't scale that much higher than any other character, but you still can do a lot of plunging with his burst active, so keep that in mind. It is of course all going to be anemo damage as well. You can use his skill in the air, meaning mid-burst, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that just about covers everything. I don't need to go over resources too much. If it's up on the screen, you know what to farm. He is 100% anemo damage over physical damage, so make sure you have the right team setup to where you have constant elements out on the field so you can make the most of Swirl. Don't forget to have healing in your team, because even though it is small, he is going to lose HP using his burst. Artifact sets, Viridescent, Noblesse, probably your two best options. And yeah, I hope this video was helpful to be better prepared for when XIAO drops in about 2 weeks, or if he's available right now depending on when you're watching this. I currently have my pity at around 40, and I pulled Chi-Chi on my last raid up summon, which means he's guaranteed, so I know for a fact I'm going to have him. That's fantastic. What are your guys' thoughts on XIAO? Are you pulling for him, or are you waiting on Hu Tao? Or are you waiting for someone else even further down the line in the future? Rosaria, Ayaka? Let me know in the comments. Let me know how you're planning on using your XIAO. Honestly, I think he is fully going to be like DPS and nothing else. But if you have other ideas about how to utilize him, then let me know about that as well, of course. Make sure to sub to the channel, leave a like on the video if you enjoyed the content you saw today. If any information comes out about XIAO in the next few weeks, I will make sure to cover it, especially if it's from MiHoYo themselves. My name has been Spinecar. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.